Thank you all. Thank you for all our artists who are here today. And thank you for all of you attending on Zoom and for our wonderful students and guests in the gallery. Thank you for coming. I'm Michael Chovan-Dalton, the director of the JKC Gallery. And this is the road home. And I'm going to go become camera operator right now.
All right. Hi, everybody, both in person and virtual. It's close enough. This is always a thing we have to struggle with. All right. So my name is Ryann Casey. I am a adjunct professor here at Mercer and also at Stockton University. I'm also a freelance curator, independent curator that has been working in that space for about 12 years. JKC Gallery and I have been collaborators for 3, 4, 5 years at this point. It's a long time. And I'm happy to welcome everyone to the current show that just went up yesterday. And we have a number of artists here that I'm excited to talk to and have really incredible conversations, especially on topics that are really relevant and of course important. And so what I'm going to do now is just have everyone introduce themselves, our speakers for today. And then just as a reminder, as we're sort of going through it, if you have questions, comments, please make sure you kind of tell us those at the end. We are going to have some time for a Q&A. So we would love to hear some feedback and some questions from the audience, both in person and also virtual. All right, so I'm going to kind of throw it to everyone.
Yeah. Our moderator today is actually one of our artists. Yes.
Everything's pinned okay? Yeah, okay. All right, so let's get started. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Ryan. My name is Fátima Martínez. I'm a Spanish journalist living in Colombia, and I have been very obsessed always with documentary photography and migration. And I have here at least four artists with me. And if you don't mind, Ryan, because we have a Jennifer and Rola as well, apart from Maysun and Ara, we can listen to them, all of them, if we have time, because it's the opportunity to present their work. So let's begin with Maysun, which is a visual journalist and storyteller and a great photographer in Spain. And she has been documenting a lot of conflicts in Spain. She's Spanish and Palestinian, and she can show us part of your artwork and your job. Okay, Maysun?
Hi, well, as she said, thank you so much, first of all, to Ryan and Michael and everybody, and Fatima for having me. And I'm glad and honored to take part in this exhibition and this talk. And well, as she said, my name is Maysun, and I'm a Spanish Palestinian photographer that has been working in conflict zones for 18 years, I think, already. Well, I'm taking part in this exhibition with the story I've done. It's part of long-term project about Palestinian identity in and out of Palestine. And this is exactly, it's 3 pictures. Well, it's a part of this story, as I was mentioning, and it's not this picture, but I wanted to show a part of the story I did so you can understand a little better what I was doing. This was the story I did over 2014 and 2015. It started in 2014 during the Israeli war in Gaza, and I continue months later in the aftermath of Gaza when basically most of the media was gone, and people in Gaza was left with nothing and destruction. And I think one of the responsibilities that we have as journalists and photographers is to go back to places that are not in the media, not in breaking news anymore, and dig more about the issues that are happening, and try to escape from the cliches that are in media. For me, at least for me, is the most important thing. To try to humanize the stories, to make people have empathy and try to make people close to what's happening on the field. And because most of the times what we hear in the news is numbers and statistics and what war translates into money and numbers and dollars. But I think war is way more than that. Is loss and is death and destruction, but it's also resilience. It's also the capacity to rebuild and the capacity of people to continue their lives no matter what. Even if they don't have the tools to do it, they don't have any other option than continue living. And I think I'm really interested in that. I'm really interested in not just injustice, but how people survive and are able to continue their lives and thrive, despite conflict. And I think that's what I want to show with my pictures. I work in different ways. I sometimes go and cover the breaking news, which is the most immediate event, but I really like, and I really try to go after to places. I've been covering the Middle East for a long time, but not just the Middle East. I've been in the Balkans, in East Africa, in Southeast Asia, in many places. And I think that what you find in every conflict, even if it's if they are different, I mean, every war is different, but it has similar aspects. And I think people end up wanting the same and looking for the same. They look for love, to feel safe, and to have people to share their happiness with. And I think that's universal language. That's something that we can all relate. And I think that's what I try to express with my pictures. When you lose something, when you lose your home, when you have to run away, when you have to leave everything behind, and it's something that is happening kilometers away or miles away from other people. How can you show it in a way that people far away connect with your pain and with what's happening with you? And I think that's something that it's powerful. I think photography is a really powerful tool to be able to connect people and to be able to understand, to make them understand what's happening in the world. I think it's a responsibility, and I think that has been my choice since I started. I know that I'm not able to change this world. I would be naive to think about that, and it would be naive. But I think it's important that everybody try to do something for the common good. And what I try to do with my work is try to add something good, to the good fight. I as a journalist and as a photographer, I would like to think that my work is adding something valuable, even if it's a little, even if it makes someone, even one person, change their point of view about something that is happening and make them live in a more conscious way, I think. So basically, this is what I've done in Gaza, where I think people, it's not just another conflict, and I'm going to finish because otherwise it's going to be endless. But it's not just another conflict. It's a situation that has been happening for a long time, and this is a mousetrap. This is the biggest jail in the world because people are getting bombed every day, but they cannot go anywhere. We're watching now what's happening in Ukraine, and people are able to go to the border and try to escape there. But in this case, in Gaza, they cannot leave. All the borders are completely closed, and so when they have endured war, which has been too many times, though, they have had to be there. They were stuck there, and I think that's something that changed completely the narrative and how the world sees it. I think it is a very unique situation, and I'm really interested in showing their daily life and how they deal with all of that situation. I don't want to talk too much because otherwise.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Maysun. A powerful image. Maysun has been working a lot since 2014. I follow her, and I follow her job.
2004.
2004. I follow you from 2014 when you were in Gaza, and you have been publishing a lot of pictures as well in the media, like New York Times and Washington Post. And you have been doing a great job. And we are watching this image from Gaza. Right now, the media are watching and looking at Ukraine because of the conflict in Ukraine, but we are forgetting many other conflicts like Gaza, Palestine, or even though Armenian conflict and what's going on in Lebanon. We have with us Ara Oshagan. Ara Oshagan is very interesting. I didn't know you until this opportunity to meet you here. Ara was born in Beirut, Lebanon, but he has been very linked to his origins with Armenian communities. Ara, if you want, you can share your screen, and we can watch part of your work with artwork with Armenian and with all what you are doing with Armenian communities and diaspora. If you want, you can share your screen, and you can explain us what are you doing, what you are doing with these communities from Armenia. And I have a friend from Armenia, and she's a photographer, and she's always telling me, Fatima, nobody is talking about Armenia, and she's very angry right now because everyone is talking about Ukraine, but nobody is talking about Armenian people. So good to talk with good to talk to Maysun, which is talking about Palestine people, and good to talk to you, Ara, today to talk about Armenian people.
Thank you so much, Fatima, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Michael and Ryann, to have me be part of this exhibition. I was very moved, Maysun, by your work of witness, which is so important. And as Fatima said, you know, it is a little bit maddening. It's sad and maddening to see so much coverage of the Ukrainian conflict, while the same thing has been happening in Palestine for decades. And you get, you know, one article maybe every couple of months, someplace, and usually from the Israeli point of view, right? So to have this kind of massive coverage of a conflict, and that is identical to what happened to Armenia about 2 years ago when Azerbaijan invaded Armenia in the exact same way. Indigenous Armenian land, they invaded to recolonize that area. And literally, the world was absolutely silent. So it's a little bit maddening. Like Fatima, you said your Armenian friend is feeling the same thing. I'm feeling the same thing. But also, I think it's fantastic to see that kind of reaction by the world for the Ukrainian people. I think we really have to important to state that. And hopefully all this coverage, all this outpouring of support will make an impact and will stop the war somehow, or slow it down, or perhaps make the situation better for the Ukrainians. So that's all our hope. And then hopefully the next conflict, same thing can happen. So my work is, I'm gonna, let me speak a little bit about the background where I come from. So I was born in Beirut, as Fatima said. I'm born into an Armenian community. I'm Armenian Lebanese with this semi-Armenian and French upbringing. So it's kind of a mixed hybrid, different number of identities. And then we fled the war in 1975. Right when it began, we fled the war and came to the United States. So American culture is also, I kind of came of age in the United States. So that's also part of my identity, my culture, who I am. Multiple kind of identities in unison, in contention, in harmony, as I think a lot of us are, who live in many different countries and have lived many different places, and carry along with us our cultures and our baggage, and so my work, I'm going to show the work today that's actually in the some of the work that's showing in the gallery today. That's from Beirut.
One moment, Ara,
Yes.
Can you share your screen? If you don't mind, could you share your screen?
Okay.
If we can, because it's for the people who are by Zoom, via Zoom, we need to watch part of your work. You have there your image, Ara?
So I share the whole screen. Yeah.
Yes, please. Thank you. That's it.
Can you
Perfect.
see? Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Okay. So the nexus of this work, this is work from Beirut, from a neighborhood called Burj Hamid, that I'm sure Rola is familiar with. It's a neighborhood that was settled by refugees, Armenian refugees from the 1915 Armenian genocide. So the nexus of this work is really about 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago, where my ancestors who lived in Armenia, in indigenous Armenian land, have been there for many millennia, were exiled from that land by the Armenian genocide, and some of them, and then they all settled in the various regions in the Middle East, in the Swana region, big community in Beirut starting after 1920s. And Burj Hamid was one of the areas where they settled this neighborhood. And so I was born near that area, and as I said, I left. And so this work is returning. So I started returning back to Beirut and to the Armenian communities there, and Beirut and Lebanon in general, in 1914 to work on this long project. And this is the project that was just published as a book, and released actually last year. It's called Displaced. And the work is about diaspora. It's about the aftermath. Is kind of a post-conflict work, looking at what is the structure of diaspora, because displacement is, I think, is not just a single event where you displace and you kind of start over again. This kind of idea of starting over, to me, is kind of a fiction. It's really displacement is kind of a structure that it remains within you, within your community, within your culture. And as an Armenian descendant, we've not only been displaced by the genocide to Lebanon, but I've also been displaced from Lebanon to the United States. So there's multiple displacements happening in multiple ruptures in personal life, in collective life, culture. And so that's kind of structure that diaspora is. So that's what I kind of try to articulate. What is that what I call diasporic presence? What does that look like? What does that structure feel like when you look at diasporic spaces? And I'm going to show a few images from my work here. So I'm going to show pictures now, not talk so much. And so, you know, and I'll return. What I did is I returned to Beirut. So I brought my own history back into a space that has its own history of dispossession, refugee, plus, of course, the 1975 war, and that 20-year war that also created a lot of trauma and death and difficulties for the community there. But, you know, tremendous amount of perseverance there, resilience in the community. And then there's a Syrian war that created more refugee issues in Lebanon. And then my work, this work that I'm showing here comes at a time right after the Syrian war. So from 2014 to 2018 is when I photographed in Beirut. So, and we know the story. I think Rola will speak about what happened after that. I was not a witness to what happened after that, the explosion and the economic collapse. I'm sure Rola will address that open. And so my work is about the spaces that are my own childhood spaces, but also I'm returning with my own history, and that place has its own history. And so I'm trying to look at the structure, the way of life in these spaces.
Very interesting. Ara, are you working in black and white usually? So are you working with your photo pictures in black and white?
Yeah, so the project started in black and white. I have a trilogy of work that's in Los Angeles, Armenia, and in Beirut that are about diaspora, and that's all in black and white. And the book that I published is in black and white. These are the work in black and white, but I did do some color work. Then in fact, I did a film, which hopefully I'll show some of these photos, and then we can show the film. It's like a 3-minute, very short film. Is that okay?
We can watch it if you want.
Yeah. So I'm just going to show some of these images, and you know, part of my work is about the ambiguity, the fragility of the diasporic spaces, the layering of history, and I try to connect to that through my work, through the approach that I take to photography, as well as the content. It's also the structure, the composition, the approach that is really important for me. This is at AUB. This is where I used to play as a kid on this tree. So this is an important picture for me. And so the composition, the structure for me is very important. It speaks to the structure of diaspora and multi-generational kind of dispossession that exists in that space, and the resistance also to that dispossession and the resilience. Mm-hmm. This is in Anjar. This is in a village outside in the Bekaa Valley, outside of Beirut, where Armenians also settled. So I try to connect different pieces of the Armenian community together here. Diaspora is decentralized. In a sense, we're all decentralized. So my work kind of speaks to that, where the center, where things are happening always on the periphery, a lot of times off frame, off the edges of the frame, rather than in the center. The center is kind of not there when you're in a kind of diasporic. Diasporic presence doesn't have a center. Okay, so maybe I can stop here and I can show the film quickly. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so let me go full screen. So let's play it. Okay. Let me know if you can hear it. There's no sound at the beginning, but as soon as there's imagery, there will be sound.
Yes.
Keep us so close to Bargain. Ne konuşuyoruz sen burada? Artık çakçak filmler gibi. Bargain'in işinin tam balkonu amlarla anormal bir. Բնականաբար կերպուր
Ուրճամուտի բնագիչներն ապահովությունը երաշխավորելու համար բոլոր շրջաններում մեջ դղակը ոչ մեկ բաղ դամսեցան եւ հայոց թաղերու մեջ հայ քաղաքացիներու պաշտպանության կորձի մեջ իրենց նահատակությամբ հավերժացան այն թղամասերուն հետ։ Հոյթասարդարաբադ ժողովրդային դան 14 նահատակներուն անունները նշեց Մգրդիչյան, Անտրանիկ Դումանյան, Վարուժան Թերլակյան, Վարդան Բողարյան, Երվան Խզարջյան, Կարնիկ Վարդավեդյան, Զավեն Հովաննեսյան, Վրեժ Արսլանյան, Խաչիկ Արաբյան, Սիմոն Օսկայան, Սարգիս Աբաջյան, Խաչիկ Պասմաջյան, Հարություն Թենկերյան, Հրայր Վարդանյան եւ Ռաֆի Սադիկյան։
Այսինքն ամեն կողմեն բաներացեք։ Ադե ինքնությունը գներեք այսինքն լացի բայց շատ մեջը սպանացի նեղություն կա, որտեղ ամենը վրա եկիդես Parakanır ama bandera başlık. Mesela o labda başlık mı falan çekmesi. Samsun'u sağlam kişi, ya sağlam kişi mi diyeceğim ama hangi sınırı var? Kişi mi?
Այս մտնոլորտով մենք ասկի բաբան թարցած ենք, եղած ենք պահան, ով որատ բահանին ուզե պիծ տալ, ծերկը գտրեք, սեքեն, ետ կոտսեք, վերջագետ դիգորդով ամանյանով,
Mem na, bez darime mi yaratan gepanın?
Bez
darime. Eğer babandun ne ayo, mamandun ne ayo, Tsep sanger ve torne. Jamakani san kukak ve teze kankani. Ur bir tane kere san bitak. Bez darime mi? Ne kadar yaratan gepanın? Bez.
Lave.
So thank you for the opportunity to share my work. And I'll be we'll be happy to answer questions later if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you so much. Very interesting, and it's quite difficult to do that kind of documentary film as well. It's not easy at all. I saw you did it 2020 during this pandemic time. So it's not easy at all to do film with pictures and how to make a film, documentary film to talk about this. And it's quite difficult to give voices, to give the platform to the people to give by themselves. Let's keep listening. For instance, Rola, if you want to present yourself and to give us some clue about your job and about your artwork.
Sure, thank you. Thank you. First of all, thank you, Michael and Ryan, for organizing this show and for the incredible curating of such a meaningful and really powerful show. It's an honor to be part of it and to share the space with all of you. I'm Rola Khayyat. I'm a Lebanese documentary photographer, but I also curate and I'm an educator. So just very briefly, my work focuses on war and memory. You've seen Ara's work and you've seen Maysun's work, coming from, a place of conflict, a place of constant struggle. It's the only sort of natural thing to do is to do work about war or this site of perpetual conflict. I'm very interested in the memory aspect of it all. How do we sort of make sense of the reality that we're born into and that we sort of live with and have to kind of exist in. So having grown up in the context of the Lebanese Civil War and the Lebanese Civil War ended in 1991, the peace treaty was signed, but then afterwards a whole string of events continued. So it was a state of protracted war. We're talking about, political assassinations, Israeli operations, maybe 2 or 3, a global pandemic, an economic crisis that is unprecedented and is just, getting worse day by day, a revolution that erupted, what is called the Thawra, a port blast. So just that's it in a nutshell. So the country has gone through a lot of, ebbs and flows, highs and lows, and it's this situation of constant instability. So coming from a place like that, you kind of have to normalize what we can say is slightly abnormal situation. And I guess this is where I come to what my work is about. It's looking at, these sort of extraordinary moments, which become very ordinary, and ordinary moments which become very extraordinary. And this is what I try to express in the photos. You can see there are some photos of the Thawra, the uprisings that happened in 2018. That's when the sort of
Rola, can you share your screen? You have your pictures in your computer?
Don't, because I wasn't planning to speak, so I'm just, I don't have any photos prepared. But I guess everyone who's there can look at the photos up on the wall. I'm sorry for that.
Another run through as well of the gallery. Yeah.
Yeah, so just to summarize it, I mean, everything that Ara spoke about, this idea that starting over is fiction, and I loved how you put it, Ara. It's, it's not something that you land in a place and then you start over. It's something very perpetual, it's protracted. It's something that you have to, it comes from a very sort of long history, and it's just something that you drag on with, right? And Maysun, also in your work, you speak about this continuous struggle, regardless of, if the media has a spotlight on what's happening in Gaza or not, it's happening, right? And it's how do you communicate the sort of reality or the humanity of the event and bring it forward. So I feel, very honored to share a space with, work that is, broadening this sort of putting a platform to issues that we're addressing in our work. That's it in a nutshell, in a very sort of quick summary.
Thank you, Rola. So let's listen to Jennifer Cabral. Jennifer, she's from Brazil. Tell us a little bit about your artwork, and if it's about migration, displacement, what do you want to tell us?
Everyone, thank you for having me. My work has become very personal unexpectedly. I wanted to talk about immigration, and I was trying to talk about environmental crisis from a specific region where I come from in Brazil, which is the mining region of Minas Gerais and Belo Horizonte. In 2015 was the first disaster of a mining dam that broke in Mariana. And then in 2019, we had Brumadinho and other disaster that now killed, I believe, over almost 300 people. And being far away from home was very hard to witness and not being able to do anything, because if I was there, I would be photographing it, but I wasn't. And so I'm gonna just share my screen real quick.
I just want to point out, Sebastián Salgado is from Minas Gerais as well, Jennifer, and he has been one of the iconic photographers around from race. He has been taking pictures from all over the world. So Jennifer, if you can share your screen and the last time,
I apologize.
part of your job.
Are you able to see anything right now?
Not at the moment.
Apologies. To share. Oh, I'm not.
I had to make you a co-host. Yes, so now you are a co-host. You should be able to share now.
Okay. All right, that would be my fault.
No, I should have just made everyone a co-host.
Bear with me. Sorry, I'm trying to.
That's it.
So one thing about my work is that words are always part of it in my latest works. So the title Mineira, I am someone from Minas Gerais. We call ourselves Mineiros. I am a Mineira, but I chose to title this work, the series, Mine Ira, which is to speak out about how we can no longer hold our identity as someone from Minas Gerais without acknowledging that we were all witnesses of environmental crisis and witness of environmental crimes. And we not only participated somehow, but we didn't do much to stop it. And being far away from home, I started looking at images from my childhood, and there's this iconic mountain called Serra do Curral del Rei. And I started to remember, where was the mountain in my memories? If it was on the right, on the left, on the back of me, in front of me. And I went to Google Maps and I traced the mountain, and I started placing it over my photographs, as I remember where that those rocks that I love so much were always protecting me from. And then I decided to include the word mine, just to point out where in the mountain that the mine was, because this is a symbol of our town, the Serra do Curral del Rei, but it's now just a shell. The mining industry completely gutted the mountains. There's nothing behind it. It's just a green facade. And so I wanted to point out the location of the mine, but what I didn't expect was that it landed on my body. And then I realized that I was speaking about something else, which was my own childhood abuse. And these are the two images I have in the show, but it's about 11 images that I have. And these are all Carnaval, which we're having this week, and all the traditional celebrations of my state, like church, and every like the first photograph is our soccer stadium, which is adored by all the residents. So this is like iconic photographs from someone that grew up where I did. But I was speaking about what had happened to me as well, and trying to speak out about the environmental crimes that were committed at the same time. So this is the first series that is in the show, and thank you so much, Michael and Ryann, to include me in this. And so this is the second work, and it's called Borderline. And Borderline happened when two events were happening. First, that the wall in the south on the border with Mexico was being built, and the path of citizenship to the Dreamers was being blocked, and the uncomfortable and painful realization that we are telling people who were born in this country that you don't belong here. And that's how this work came about. And it started, I don't know if the images came first or the text came first. So these are the two first images that are in the show. And it's a series of about 6 images, but there's a poem with it. And if it's okay, I just want to read one paragraph.
Go ahead, of course.
We are a vast territory you will never own. You don't course through us, we course through you. Hear our voice, sound travels over you. Our birthplace has been written. We are living documents. We have our own identities, so don't tell us what we are not. Beware of where you cut us through, because you die when we die. And so this are 3 paragraphs, and I try to talk about the perspective of the individual, of people, and of the land, and how can we dare tell someone that they do not belong to a place there they know they've always been part of. And so this is the series, and this border and this line originally is done on a sheet of glass. The frame is very deep and far away from the photograph, so it creates a shadow. You don't have that in the gallery because this was just a printed photograph, but this line is supposed to be erasable, movable, and that border could be the US, it could be Palestine, it could be Ukraine. And so, yeah, this is my work. One last thing that I will say is that both these works mark a very big shift in my work. I know when I started photography, I wanted to be like you, all of you here, Ara, Rola, Maysun, and Fátima. Like I was going to do documentary photography, photo essays, and that's all I wanted to do. But I did a little bit of it. But in 2016, I was diagnosed with cancer. And at that moment, I wasn't able to work the way I used to. And this work, Borderline, was created from this desperate place of wanting to still be creative and produce something, even though I couldn't carry the camera. So these photographs were printed on silver gelatin prints. They were on frames and they were stacked as almost like a symbol of something that I would never do again. And then from that place, I just got a Sharpie, the poem came, the line came, and this work came out. So between the work about the mind and this work, I've been incorporating more and more graphics and words and poetry And because this is how I started as an art school in Brazil, Escola Guinhar, a small school in Belo Horizonte. And then I decided to drop everything. I was working as a graphic designer. I came to New York to be a photographer. And so now I'm kind of going back to where everything started. So that's my story. Thank you for including me. How do I stop?
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Very interesting. Anyway, all of the work, all of the artwork is very, very I respect all of them. So you can use photography, you can work on it. Ara has a job as well, working with different pictures, as I can see, not only in black and white, but also in color, with working with another kind of mixing pictures as well. So I think Ryann, Michael, if you don't mind, it's time for the Q&A. I think people have questions right now and they can ask us what they want.
There's just one thing. First, I have to apologize to Rola because I was supposed to mention that Rola wasn't going to speak. But Rola, that was beautiful, and I'm so glad you did speak.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael.
And just to go ahead, Rola.
No, please don't apologize. I'm really glad that I had the opportunity to speak. So thank you.
Yes, and just I don't think we some of Rola's work.
We are watching the part of the pictures. There are pictures, Rola, right? From Lebanon.
Yes.
From Lebanon, yeah. Beirut.
Mm-hmm.
So
thank you, Michael. Thank you, Michael.
Do we have any questions in the chat?
Oh, let me check the chat. And so I think what we'll do is we'll go back and forth between the two. Let's see. So those of you who are online, if you want to type into the chat some questions, feel free. Those of you here would like to ask some questions.
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
How did you and Ryann find us? How did you connect and discover us? Because I know how you found me, but I don't know how you found each one of us.
What was that?
How did you connect with everyone?
Oh, I feel like I should have a better response. I usually just cold email people when I like their work. I mean, I feel like most of you know that, except for Maysun, who Fátima actually recommended. But mostly, I just kind of search online, and honestly, it's like hours and hours of just researching, finding people that I think that I find their work interesting. I'm interested in what they say. And, one of the reasons for that, and I know that doesn't necessarily make sense, like, wouldn't you just go with people but for me, curating, it's really important for you to get outside of your own world, to get to know people that are not necessarily connected directly to you. And so a lot of the artists that I've chosen, especially over the last 3 shows, have been people whose work I've seen in galleries, work I've seen online, came with recommendations that I think are just really interesting. So that's been sort of my process. And with some level of success, I don't, it's very confusing why everyone emails me back, even though they don't know me, but, I'm really thankful for everybody's trust in that. And I will say, Ara and I have just worked together last semester on a pretty large show on the Armenian genocide. And so he was a very obvious choice on this one, especially with his release of his new book. So yeah, so, and we met, at the Trend Art Gallery. So yeah, so it's, I know that's not a great, explanation, but I think, again, it's one of those things where I typically in shows like this, I only include maybe 2 or 3 people I personally know, if that, just because I want to make sure the exhibitions represent outside of my world, outside of just the people I know. And so I think that's really fundamentally important to have a greater perspective. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ryann. I would like to say something. First of all, give my thank you for everyone, because they have been doing a great job. And another thing is, I would like this could be the very beginning of something new. We talk about that, Ryan, like a network with journalists, photographers, academics working on migration, displaced people. We can do something together to publish books, for instance, doing workshops, looking for funding in order to do much more things, no, related to this displacement, migration, photography, animate, how to work with this and to begin a network of people who are working on this. What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, I think like to add to that, a big part of my process, and we've talked about this before, is collaboration and creating new spaces that are really about, not just about showing work, but having a collaboration between space and curator and artist. That to not sort of acknowledge these really strict lines that we typically see sometimes in sort of more traditional spaces, and to acknowledge that there are better ways to represent communities that have not only the institution's input, but also those communities' input as well. And I think those are things that both you and I are talking about now, and also we'll be talking about at conferences in the next few weeks. And so I hope to develop a lot more work and a lot more, events like this. It's going to sort of showcase that as well. Yeah.
Okay. Ryan, we have a comment here. All the speakers were very fine. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Gary, for this comment.
So we have a question in the audience.
Yeah, Bonnie, go ahead and say your. Oh, sorry, that's very loud. Bonnie, go ahead and say your question, and then I'll repeat it if we need to.
This question is for Ara and Maysun. First of all, I cannot respect you, photojournalists. I would like to know, is it difficult for you to keep your emotion in check when you're taking these pictures? Because the emotion that comes through on the pictures is real. I walked through the gallery yesterday and I couldn't complete it because there's emotion in the picture. And how do you keep your emotions in check when you're photographing these things?
Were you able to hear that?
Yeah, a little bit, but I wouldn't mind if you repeat the question.
So Bonnie asked, how do you keep your emotions in check when you're making this work? Bonnie's personal experience when she first entered the gallery was she had to sort of stop because it was emotionally overwhelming. The photos, the emotions are in the photos. How do you keep those emotions under control or in check?
Well, I think there's different situations, though. I mean, in this situation for me is a very personal subject. I'm Palestinian, and I started this career because I had the personal need to do something, to not just to show the world what was happening, but to understand it myself. I needed to understand what was to be Palestinian. I didn't understand my own identity, and I naturally took a camera and started documenting my surroundings. I think the approach I have when I'm working, it can sound as a cliche maybe, but the camera sometimes feels like a shield. When I photograph, I'm so focused on what I'm doing that I don't have time for emotions at that moment, because I have something to do. I have a job to do, and I need to feel that I'm doing something useful. I have a responsibility. So I think I just focused on what I'm doing, and I connect with what's happening through the camera. So I think it's a different approach. Obviously, when I go back and I see the photos in my laptop, I confront the emotions, and sometimes I feel overwhelmed, and sometimes there are pictures that I've done that I will never be able to see again myself, because I don't want to see them because they're too strong, no? And they don't serve a purpose to what I want to tell, because I think, I take pictures being very aware that it's a gift from people to be there, but they are granted me permission to show what's happening to them, especially if they're going through something emotional or a tough moment in their lives. So I'm very respectful to how I show what's happening, how I photograph them. So I try to tell the story from a really responsible way, and try to show my respect to them and my gratitude, because I think that's the least I can do. And I think some pictures, even if they are strong, it is necessary to see them, but they are not, they are not for free. Sometimes I have to show blood or tough moments or people crying or people in funerals or whatever. And I think these images are important to see, because I don't want to show conflict in an unrealistic way. I want people to understand that war is bad. War is the worst thing that humans can do. There's no winners ever. And I think you cannot disguise that through the beauty of pictures. But also, as a photographer, I have the responsibility to take pictures with ethics, and I have to show the story without being macabre. I don't have to show too much blood in order for people to understand what's happening. So you have to balance what's going on without having to filter too much what's happening, telling the whole story without being too aggressive, because if you show too much blood, or first of all, it wouldn't be respectful with the people, and second, it wouldn't be helpful, because people, they have a limit. So it's not like you can see everything sometimes. So you can tell the story from a respectful point of view. Obviously, I have that in mind when I'm working, and I try to do my best to keep my own emotions away, because if I'm there, it's because I have something to do and I'm not the protagonist there. They are. And that's part of the respect I try to have with the people I photograph. Obviously, I'm not made of stone, and sometimes I've been working and crying at the same time, and I couldn't stop. And this is what came at that moment. So it happens. Sometimes you get carried away with what's happening, and you as long as you keep doing what you have to do, and you're not you don't become an obstacle for people, then it's okay to feel you're human. I think emotions, no matter what they are, if they are fear, if they are sadness, they are there for a reason. We're humans. And as long as I can continue doing my work in the meantime, they're fine. Thank you for the question, by the way.
Thank you so much, Maysun. And I would like to underline that I think Jennifer, Rola, I don't know if Rola is in US as well, Ara, we are migrants. We are migrants in another country who where we are living right now, and the fact to be migrants is make us much more sensitive and vulnerable to migrants, right? It's like we are much more. In the case of Maysun, she is Palestinian at the same time Spanish, and I think that is a feeling that you have in order that you give part of your artwork this kind of personal feeling or personal experience, right?
Yeah, I think I probably wouldn't have become a photographer if this was not the case. For me, it was a necessity about identity. to understand myself, who I was. No, so yeah, I mean, I was going to become an archaeologist, you see. So in the end, I think the inner necessities that we have, they choose for us sometimes, no? And no matter what you want to become in life, no matter if you have plans, you end up doing what you need to do. And it can be through any sort of tool. Like you can write, you can paint, you can take a camera, you can sing. I think your identity have certain needs, and it just translates into something. And I think that's very valuable. I think no matter where we come from, we are from very different places, but at the end of the day, we all want the same. We have so many things in common. When Ara was talking about his roots and his multiple identities, and I could relate so much. I was like, man, I'm the same, no? Like I've been raised in a place, I've born in a place, but at the same time, I've grown up really feeling uprooted at the same time, you know? So it's always like, I think one of the valuable lessons that I've learned about identity is that you're never half Palestinian, half Armenian, half something. You're whole. You're whole Palestinian, you're whole Armenian, you're whole Lebanese. No, you have the gift. You have the lack to be more than one thing at the same time. This is something that is huge, I think, because and I'm sorry, I'm talking too much. I just want to say this and I finish. Part of my life, and I think part of my feeling of being uprooted was that I always felt like a half. People asked me, what do you feel more, Palestinian or Spanish? If you had to choose, what would it be? And it's like, why I have to choose? Why do I have to choose? Why I cannot be both? And in the end, I knew that I can be both. I can be whatever I want. And I think it's important to also show the people that you can actually have different identities. You can, and you know, it's I think it's a gift to be, it's like speaking different languages, no? If you're native in German and in Chinese, for example, it is a beautiful gift. So I think having different identities and different perspective about different places at the same time is something that makes us incredibly rich. And I think it is beautiful that we can put that together in the same exhibition, no? To show so many faces of the same language, you know. So I'm really grateful that we can have this this chance to put this all together, because we're in the end we speak the same language, which is the identity language.
Thank you so much, Maysun.
If I could add very quickly, Fatima, to that.
Go ahead.
I really appreciate what you said, Maysun, about that we embody all the cultures that we have. It isn't like you're half or a quarter or this or that. I really feel the exact same way, that, you know, we write, or a lot of times it's written by hyphenation, right? So you're like, Lebanese - Armenian, or you're Spanish - Palestinian. So I'm categorically against this kind of hyphenation. You want to put those identities on top of each other, right? They all have to treat it as if they exist at the same time. What I kind of think about it as like a non-hierarchical kind of existence, where neither one is really above or below the other, but they all exist potentially in you at any one moment. You fully embody any one of those languages or identities, even though you may only speak, you know, 38 words of Arabic like me. I still embody that culture that's in me because I was born in that space and it's in who I am. So I think it's really important. The diaspora as a space of creativity. It can be viewed as a space of ambiguity and difficulty, which it is. You know, I think, and a lot of times when we were younger, for us, it's conflicting, right? Because we have this societal pressure saying, oh, you should do this or that, or you may not be accepted by the dominant culture that's where you end up. But my experience has been that it's also a place of tremendous creativity and a space of connectivity rather than a negative kind of space that's often referred to. So.
Can I add one little thing?
Go ahead.
I just read 2 lines. Our birthplace has been written. We are living documents. We have our own identity. So don't tell us what we are not.
Exactly.
Perfect.
Can you repeat, Jennifer, in order to...
Our birthplace has been written. We are living documents. We have our own identity, so don't tell us what we are not. Michael, by the way, are these in the gallery? Did you receive? Okay, so people can
Yeah, we have those.
Yes, Jennifer.
Yes, very beautiful.
I mean, I have like thousands of questions I could ask, but I know that my students have to get back to class. So,
did anybody have one final question from the classes?
yeah, and just so the participants know, in the audience, I'm sure there's community members as well, but we have history of art students, photo students, visual arts students, and so hopefully this talk also gives them some sort of things to think about as they sort of move and start creating on their own as well. And one of the things I thought we could end with really quickly is I'm always big on talking about how we approach difficult subject matter, challenging subject matter, and how we still maintain sort of our own kind of mental health goals. And so I was sort of wondering, because all of your work is in one way or another challenging and probably personally, you know, pretty heavy at moments. How do you counteract some of that when you're working? Because I think one of the things that students come to me with is that well, this is too hard to do, and sometimes it is, and there's no shame in that. But you know, for all of you working in that space, how do you sort of make sure that you care for yourself along with your subject matter and your content? So I think it is important to kind of think about that balance, especially for students who are thinking about going into photojournalism or art in general. And so is there any advice that you would give future photographers and artists and as they approach challenging subject matter to keep in mind?
Can I speak?
Go ahead, Maysun.
Well, I think from my point of view, precisely because my work has been focused on conflict zones, I've been through situations that have stuck in my head, and they're still there. And what I think is that you need to have a clear path of what you want to do and why you do what you do, because there's always a price, and that can be a big price. So in my case, what gives me the tools to learn how to live with that and recover myself as much as I can, which is not 100% ever, obviously, but I think it can sound silly, but it's nature. For me, nature is, we are nature. We're not in nature, we are nature. And I think being in contact with nature, with beauty, with arts, with painting, with music, that gives me, that fills me in a way that makes me heal, because what I've done is working with death and destruction and pain and loss and misery for a long time. And I think you need to countermeasure, you need to counteract that that pain and that wound that your soul and your mind has, and you need to add some value and some positive medicine to your mind in a way. And for me, I think what I in my spare time, what I try to do is to focus in life instead of death. And I think all the things that can add up positively to my life are a way of healing. I think I don't know, having some discipline in terms of like eating well, sleeping well, they are really basic. And doing sports, they're really basic, but they are so important in order to keep a healthy mind. That I think, I mean, I'm probably preaching to the choir, but I think that's the base. That's the base. If you do that, if you have a clear path, and you try to counter measure the pain with beautiful stuff, then it's not that bad.
We have a question. Thank you so much, Maysun. We have a question for us, Ara. I love your short film, Sally Figueroa, and I wonder how you decide on the sequences of your clips. Did you already know which clip you wanted to open your film with, or did you have to switch the order around to see what felt right? What a question. So, Ara, if you want to reply then.
It's Farah, you could just think about that for 1 second. I just want to say, if you do have to leave, for those of you online and those of you in the room, thank you very much. And I also want to mention before people do start leaving, that this work is for sale. A lot of it. If you go to the site at jkcgallery.online and there'll be a link. I haven't opened it up yet. I'll open it up this afternoon. Some of the artists have chosen their own charities. We will be donating proceeds as well to Trenton Area Soup Kitchen and Doctors Without Borders, who are not just working in Ukraine, but in many other places around the world. And some of the artists could actually use the money. so that site will be up. And thank you all again, those of you who are on their way out. Thank you. Okay, sorry, Ara, go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much for the question. For me, it's a very organic kind of process. In fact, making the film wasn't organic. My original work was not to make a film. But I was in Beirut, and I actually was working, taking photos. I also did some video, and as the beginning of the video showed, the language, the Western Armenian, that's my indigenous language, which is now threatened, that still exists in that space, was really, really resonant for me. And still photography has difficulty dealing with language, in the way the documentary photography. So I felt a need to add this other dimension to the work. In fact, the project has 4 dimensions. It has installation, it has collage, because it's such a complex space and such a layered history. I've had the need to add these different dimensions to this project from my other work, my other media that I use. So yeah, it's very, and the way I built it was, I wanted to do, one of the things that I knew from the very beginning was I wanted to do a 3-channel film, in terms of having 3 different things happening at the same time, or 2 or 1, but having this kind of fractured approach to filmmaking, especially because the whole narrative is fractured. Lebanon, in its history is fractured, and what is also really amazing, one of these amazing and things in Beirut, in Lebanon, is that there's a constant juxtaposition of complete extreme opposites come together at the same time in Lebanon. Where you have kind of a celebration, as well as the quietness of the church, for instance, these things. So I wanted to bring that kind of idea into the film, and they just grew organically. And I did spend a lot of time shifting things back and forth. And it's also very symbolic. It's driven by a particular symbolism. I think the key to making such a film is to find the symbolic the elements that you want to address, and find the thread that connects them all together, and make sure that you speak about the elements that you want to address. So yeah, it's very organic, very much trial and error. I have many versions of that film.
Thank you so much, Ara. Thank you so much. I think we are finishing at the end of this conversation with all of you, and it was a pleasure to listen to you, all of you as well. Ryann, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone again, both for people who came to the show, but also the artists for, again, trusting me with the work. Michael and I both. It is really our honor to have the work up, and hopefully through if you're not able to see the show in person, hopefully through the gallery, you'll be able to see everyone's work. I also want to mention to Michael to maybe say what the hours are for the gallery for people who want to come in.
Yeah, so we have hours on Tuesdays and Fridays from 10 to 2. Courtesy of Bonnie, who asked the first question. I also want to thank all the artists, especially since this was a very difficult show to put together, in that we had shut down for a while and then we came back, and everything has been kind of crazy. Thank you for thinking we weren't some scam trying to get your files. And I'm just so grateful to have this kind of representation in the gallery. It's just wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you to you, Michael and Ryann. You are great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And so this will be recorded and up on our the gallery's YouTube
yes,
page.
So this session is going to be being recorded now, and both sessions will be up at the jkcgallery.online site as well. We'll say, but you guys don't have to hang up or anything or disconnect. We'll say bye. So I'll say goodbye. So I'm going to stop the recording. Bye, everyone. And thank you all on Zoom too for coming as well. And thank you to our artists.
Thank you so much. Nice to meet you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Icía Vázquez Rodriguez, and I'm a fashion photographer and designer established in New York City. I'm from Spain, from a little town in the Northwest, and I came to New York last year with a Fulbright scholarship to study photography at the New York Film Academy. I'm the author of the project Open Doors, Closed Windows, and in the first place, I wanted to thank Michael Chovan-Dalton and the JKC Gallery for having me as a part of the exhibition. And the project that I'm presenting, Open Door, Closed Windows, it's a photographic essay that I developed during my program at NIFA. And it basically talks about my experience with arriving to a new city, to New York from Spain in the middle of the pandemic, and how I lived and how I adapted to my new neighborhood. And so basically for this project, I used to take some walks at night, and I was experiencing the life of those that were surrounding me. So I just wanted to read the artist statement for all of you. And so this is it. Since I moved from Spain to New York a few months ago, I felt that I had lost my home and I would have to build one myself. I wanted to explore my new neighborhood and meet the people that lived in my area. I started walking around in a night when everyone was supposed to be at home because I wanted to observe them. During those night walks, I was captivated by the inside of the huge and beautiful houses that surrounded my area. For many nights, I waited there, alone in the dark, watching the activities that my neighbors did in the comfort of their homes. What would my family be doing at that same moment? What could be happening at my real home? I was invaded with curiosity, and through the observation, I started feeling connected to those people. I saw my family reflected on them. I imagined what would have been like to live there, to share their space, to be them. I felt just as if I was invited to look but not to enter. Do any of these people know what blinds were invented for? I guess they didn't expect someone to be staring from the outside. I was a stranger passing by. I wasn't supposed to look. Had they seen me, they would have felt invaded. As I returned to my apartment with a knot in my stomach, I came to realize that, even though I had a house, I was still homeless. Thank you so much for having me here, and I would have loved to be part of the panel discussion and to continue talking and have a conversation about my project and the rest of the projects of the other artists, but unfortunately I couldn't make it to the panel, but I hope and I'm sure that everyone will enjoy the rest of the discussion. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. My name is Tomas Ayuso. I am from Honduras, and I am a conflict journalist by trade, I suppose, and I focus on displacement as it relates to the drug war and the different types of violences that are visited upon the people of Latin America, specifically the corridor from northern South America to the US-Mexico border. And the work that you're seeing right now is different moments from a greater project that is called The Right to Grow Old, that focuses specifically on the last decade, since about 2009 to the present, of what I call the Honduran collapse, which is a synchronization of different crises happening at the same time that disproportionately affected the youth, which has caused the thousands, if not at this point millions, of Hondurans that have left the country, that you've seen at the border, as in with this picture, or making their way through Mexico. And as to the inciting question as to what's my focus on all this, or what do I choose to demonstrate, I have to go back to my own inciting moment, which was that I did not agree with and frankly repudiated completely the treatments and the characterization of Hondurans in the media. Typically, by media, I mean Western and North Atlantic media. That would show Hondurans as craven, blood-soaked barbarians slaughtering each other, essentially. And at this point, I don't pull any punches when it comes to bringing these into terms, because that's just how it was. And people here were aware of it. So I thought that if the canon of Honduran history will be written by Western voices, there at very least should be a Honduran who is covering these stories with a Honduran mindset to at least be there in the canon. And I've been fortunate enough to be able to show this work in places such as this forum. And to go back to the title, Right to Grow Old, is, I guess, the thesis of this project, that in Honduras, since 2009, more or less, the right to grow old has been abolished by force, meaning that if you are young in Honduras, you end up having two choices. And if you belong to 70% of the people who live in poverty, which is displacement, and for some join armed groups or just endure. But in this project, as you can see in these pictures, if you can go back some, thank you. It's not just the misery and the violence and the displacement, but also the many different voices that happen within, such as the resilience and the survivance of different communities, and how people amidst the rubble of a collapsed society, because I don't really consider Honduras a failed state, although by many definitions it's more of a failed society, in as much that people have grown before with, or the image you were just prior to that one.
Prior to that, you said?
Yes. That, there, perfect. And figuring how this woman, a mother, I believe she's 28, decided not to displace, but rather go back to her village. She is of the Garifuna ethnic group, which is a Ameri Indian group. Afro-Indigenous group. And chose instead to displace, as have been many Garifuna have done so, chose to stay. So I look at all the different aspects and different questions that arise from the how and the why of the collapse, and I guess try to find and have found the people who best represent these different axes.
Yep.
Should I talk? I don't want to suck up too much time, so I
Oh no, that's great. Thank you. Yeah. My apologies too for I don't know if you all are seeing what's happening online. Our TV is going in and out, so every time I have to unplug it, I think it stops the share. Are you all seeing that on Zoom? Or no?
Everything's fine.
Oh, good. Okay. So then I apologize to the live audience here, an in-person audience. Okay.
And so we're going to cycle back to some of the questions that I sort of have, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the issues that were just raised. But I thought maybe we can talk about the artist first, and then we can kind of cycle back to that. So, Camilla, did you want to jump in now?
Sure. So what I have decided to show with the road home, migration, displacement, and redefining where we live is my project called Stories from the Sun. And I have some of the original works here. Let's see, I wanted to, okay. I have some of the original works here that I wanted to show you. But before showing you, I wanted to talk a little bit about why I started this project. So as an immigrant myself, I wanted to sort of connect to other immigrants who have had similar stories as myself, and just see if other people had similar experiences of displacement like me. So I kind of wanted to embrace, I kind of wanted to embrace the experience of being an immigrant and sort of showcase people that have been able to flourish, assimilating into a new culture. And here's some of my work. So I have this one right here. This is the original of Susena. This is a cyanotype on wood. And you can kind of see here. Another theme that I wanted to showcase is sort of like memory, and how we lose memories when we come to a new country. We sort of like lose memories that we've had, and sort of regaining or embracing new memories, you know, in the present. So in doing these cyanotypes, you can kind of see here.
I have to say, I'm loving this sort of analog show, which is it's so nice. I love the show and tell on camera.
Yeah, so I have the originals, and if you see between, these are like different, you see here. So it sort of talks about how her memory, like the memories that she has lost and new memories that she has been able to embrace within like living in a new culture. Yeah, let's see. So I did several different editions of each one. So this one is Van Dyke Brown and cyanotype. And then this is a washed Van Dyke Brown and cyanotype. So these are actually the same image, but this one is undeveloped. And then this one is washed. So sort of talking about how these people's, how my subjects have been able to sort of redefine who they are in a new country, and sort of embracing the fact that we are immigrants and creating this community here in a new country. You know, and sort of the role that like time plays in all this. Stories from the sun. So these are all sun prints. So they're made with the sun. So I think the wooden one is probably the best representation of memories lost and regained. And this, what is it called? This theme, this, it's called reconsolidation, when you are able to think about memories, and then as you're thinking about them, it's kind of like opening up a file, and these memories are sort of changed in your mind. So it's an interesting topic to discuss when, you know, you're moving to a new country, you sort of lose a lot of who you are, and you have to assimilate. And in this assimilation process, you are redefining who you are, and you're able to make these new versions of yourself. So that is basically what my project's about.
Can you talk a little bit about the subjects? I know that you have some information that we're not showing right now about the subjects and who they were and where they're from. I know that was an important aspect.
So Sosena is originally from Nairobi, Kenya, and she now resides in Philadelphia, and she's an educator, she's a videographer and a photographer. So she's a documentarian, and she's been able to, sort of quote unquote, like make it in a new country and really flourish. And that is what sort of inspired me in the beginning, because these people were inspirations to myself as a young immigrant. I looked up to these people. And Claes is a painter and a sculptor, and he's originally from Haiti, Port-au-Prince, Haiti. And he now resides in Philadelphia. And yeah, I mean, Claes is an amazing human. He works a lot with the Philadelphia Mural Arts. He does murals all around the city. He has a mural in West Philadelphia right now, and they're discussing another mural to be made this year with Clace as well. So these are people that I really look up to as immigrants that have been able to really assimilate and flourish in a new country, which is honestly really hard. So does anybody have any questions?
So I think what we'll do is for those of you online, you could type questions into the chat and we'll try to get to those. And then when we get to the Q&A, we'll also the folks who are here will be able to ask questions.
I was going to say, Jennifer, do you want to add anything? I know that we have a different crew today, but I wasn't sure if you wanted to say anything. I can't see Jennifer. It's like
Jennifer's up there.
Yeah.
It's here. I just want to say, first encourage everybody to go to that conversation when it goes online, because this was a pretty good one. But I think it's so interesting that I feel my work is in between Camilla and Tomas, because Tomas is going back to his, not even back, going to his home. He's at his home photographing where home is. And Camilla is in this new home that she's creating now for herself and seeing others, documenting others who are doing the same. And my work was a little bit of wanting to be home and not being able to be home. And my work talks about an environmental disaster that happened in Belo Horizonte, Minas Gerais, Brazil. There are unfortunately, many disasters happening lately. The first one was 2015, Mariana. The second one in Brumadinho in 2019. And the work came up from like a desperate place of wanting to be there, wanting to document, wanting to talk about the disaster, but not being able to be home. So I don't know, does it make sense to show it again, or?
I think it does. Just because it's a new crew of people, so it's nice for people to be able to see it.
We've got a few people
bear with me
as well.
Give me 1 second. Can you see it?
Not yet.
Sorry.
There we go. Yes.
There we go. Okay, sorry. How do I do this? Better?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. So this work is called Mineira, and it's basically photos of my childhood. Most of them were me and my sister. And we are in iconic places of the town or doing typical festivities of Brazil, like Carnaval that is happening this week, or Festa Junina, which is like a folk, small towns make fire in June, or religious ceremonies. And I work with my memories of the main mountain in Belo Horizonte, which is the Serra Curral del Rei. And I went to Google Maps and I traced the mountain, and I wanted to remember where the mountain was in my memories. When I was standing in this place, where was the mountain? And this mountain was elected the symbol of the town. It's where all the boyfriends and girlfriends go to date, and has a beautiful square, was elected the symbol of the town, but it is a shell. There's nothing behind the mountain. The mining industry completely devastated that mountain. So when I traced the mountain, I decided to put the word mine in it, just to remember that mine is always there behind it. But when I did that, it landed on my body. And so that became a conversation of two stories that I was telling, which was my own abuse as a child, and claiming my own body with that word mine on it. So let me see if I can go to, this is the second image that is part of the show. And these are not, but it's part of the series, about 11 images. And the second work is called Borderline. And it happened when the wall was being built, and people being told you don't belong here, even though you were born here. And from that place of kind of anger and frustration, a poem came out, and the tracing of this line and the just happened at the same time. I don't know what came first, if it was the poem or it was the images. And a second part of this, the meaning of this work also is, at the same time that it represents this border, this line came from another very personal episode in my life, which was a surgeon tracing my chest for a surgery to remove my breast for breast cancer in 2017. So again, my works end up being about something universal, like environmental crimes and politics, but it comes from a place that is very, very intimate. And it's not intentional, it happens by accident. I don't start from that place, but it ends up talking about me. But what I've learned when I share all these works is that we are very similar in our very specific and particular personal stories. There are so many that went through the same experiences. So sharing what is something that is very specific to us surprises to connect us in ways that is very profound. So that's it. Let me start the share.
So I thought I'd open it up to just, I have a few questions. It sort of came up between all the interviews that we did this morning or this afternoon and what it sort of now too. And so what I thought I'd kind of ask generally of the artists is, almost in every talk we've had so far, the artists have talked a little bit about the idea that the media representation of displacement is generally wrong, that there isn't really, outlets that are doing a particularly good job at sort of talking about that experience. And so one of the questions that came up as I was talking to people were basically like, how can you talk about your approach to it? And how do you counter those representations that you feel are either false or misleading in some way? Like, what in your work are you able to do to try to bring us a more truthful experience for that? And I just sort of, I'm interested in the approach that everyone is taking to sort of counteract what you typically see in more media outlets, specifically Western media.
Yeah, just to preface that even more, the work the three of you show has an incredible variety or span of the idea of how you are sort of documenting the people you're interested in or the experiences that you've had, from very positive moments to very traumatic moments, right? It's all there in a very small span of work. Anyone wants
to?
I'll
go. Well, if the way that I see it is, going back to what I said at the beginning, was when I would read, the things that, like, say the New York Times, this is like 2013, what I would read just did not line up with what I was seeing at home. I guess I should say a little bit more, given the context that Jennifer and Camilla have provided. I speak the way I do because I left home at 17 and I migrated to New York. But I guess unlike Camilla and Jennifer, I had to come back. So I had to renounce my migration. So, and with that, I guess I became culturally fluent in America, specifically New York and Honduras. So I knew that people had the capacity in America to understand what was happening. However, when I would present these at the beginning of my career as a journalist, these ideas that simply would state, actually, what you're showing in the work is rather simplistic. How about we add a little bit of nuance? The editors who shall remain nameless would say, it's far too complex for our audience. So they would and this is still often is the case to this day now with other outlets, that it's just the complexity is where they have to make a choice. It seems like it, at least, to either to go. Well, it's not even a choice. They always go to the side of just reduction. So since I am independent, I chose to just one, to show how it does not reflect what I'm seeing, show moments that do not reflect what I'm seeing in the contemporary media, and by that I just show the complexities of everyone's decisions to leave. There's a myriad of reasons. So like I call it's an accumulation of traumas that cause someone to leave. It's not just a singular event most of the time. And so in showing the complexity, both the good, to label it something, and the bad, is what I decided to show, to the best of my ability, show that the people who are in these often shown as nameless hordes that only provide dehumanizing categories to ascribe to them, I chose to just show the individuality and the universe that is contained within each and every single one of these people that it is involved that make these crowds that are leaving the country. Just really going into showing the complexity that each and every single person has, regardless of their social caste, race, or anything. And more often than not, or actually every single time, everyone has a completely different set of circumstances, pasts, aspirations. And that's where I think the real wealth, not only is it my goal, but I find that that's where the true knowledge and true attempt to understand what's happening lies.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to talk a little bit? Because I think it's interesting. All of your approaches are so very different in talking about that issue of displacement, whether it's personal or for a community. And so I wasn't sure if someone else, Camilla, do you want to talk a little bit about what your approach is, like how you sort of decided to get there?
Yeah, thank you, Tomas, for your insightful response. What were you going to say, Ryan?
I was going to say it's worth mentioning that this is not the only series that deals with a lot of these ideas for you. And so there is another series by Camilla which was shown last fall that kind of deals with that too. So if you want to, you can bring that in too.
Yeah, I think the fact that, Tomas is right. The media and people and the public in general just want to get sort of a light version of what is actually happening. And the fact that we are all immigrants and we're on the ground, I think, we can really give a more real and a more real version of the story. And Right to Exist came out of this idea of identity and feeling lost and wanting to connect to other people that had similar experiences. And I definitely think that the people that are covering these stories are not immigrants, and they have no idea what it's like. So I think that sharing these stories, which is what we're doing, is really important. And it's really interesting to see Tomas and your way of sharing the story. I really appreciate your documentarian style, and Jennifer, I mean, your connection to your work is really deep, and your work with the border I really appreciate as well. So thank you for showing such a personal project. I think we need to continue to share our stories and connect, and bringing these stories to the media is really important, because if it's not us, then it's going to be somebody else, and they're not going to be sharing, you know, what's actually happening like we do, you know. I think that's important.
And if I can follow up, because I feel like this is going to add to probably what Jennifer is going to talk about a little bit too. One of the things that I sort of notice in just the conversations that we've had around the show is there's a level of like vulnerability and like truthfulness that's sort of come up with this. And what I'm kind of wondering is, when you're dealing with subject matter, whether it's your own or whether it's someone else's story, how does that play into it? Because what I'm kind of curious about is, as you're sort of standing and photographing someone, what approaches do you take to make it as authentic of a connection or collaboration as you can? Because I think we've talked about this in other episodes, but other events, is the idea of like helicoptering in, and then you're not really actually knowing someone and their story by any extent. So does vulnerability or sharing personal experiences, is that something that's part of your process? I know for Jennifer, it definitely is. How has that affected like how you tell stories?
Yeah, I think definitely sharing my story and really allowing space and time to get to know your subjects even before bringing out the camera, I think is important. Yeah, just like really making that connection and being present and showing that you're not there to exploit them. You know, you're there to create a relationship with them, and like sharing that vulnerability together, and really listening to what they have to say, and connecting within that vulnerability, I think is important, like giving space and time for that before photographing, I think it's important. Yeah.
And that's kind of a question to everybody as well, because I do think as educators, you know, we're training like the new group of photojournalists, right? I mean, that's what we're doing. And so I think it's important for even us to sort of think about how we teach the new generation of photographers, and people are going to go out and maybe create better ways to tell stories than what we've maybe done in the past. And so, you know, in terms of advice, or in terms of, you know, how do you become more of a collaborative force instead of something, as Camilla said, instead of an exploitation, which sometimes, unfortunately, that does become. So any advice or things that you can think of in terms of your process that might help a new and maybe more ethical group of photojournalists to sort of emerge.
And also the three bodies of work we have here are really fascinating to see together, because it also speaks to the idea that there are different ways to create documentary work. There are different ways to describe a culture, describe people, to see the entirety of the way people are, right?
Totally.
Well, I can talk a little bit about that, unless I feel like I'm speaking too much. I don't know if Jennifer.
Not at all.
Please.
Okay.
Jennifer had plenty of time at 12 o'clock.
All right. Well, as far as I go, and if you look at some of the pictures that I have, they are very intimate. Even I believe some of the images, if you go to my Instagram, at least you can look at your leisure. Like I've been able to even get, be in a moment of vulnerability with gang members. These are child soldiers, really. But I've managed to get their trust and to spend time with them. There's one moment where they kind of, the artifice of killer, which they are, is stripped, and you can see that they're truly just boys. And the way that I was able to do that is really just treating them like people. It sounds like obvious, but I think, not to denigrate anyone else's work, sometimes the role of photographer is overemphasized or given undue self-import or something like that, because at least what I mean by that is that I treat the people who I want to tell their stories or feel that their story is very important to share with the world. I treat them like people first, and that, like Camilla said, the camera comes later. But I truly at no moment I treat them in any other way, and establish genuine relationships with these people. Always, making it upfront that I am a journalist and so forth. So there's no any doubt there. But like say right now, as we're speaking, I got a few WhatsApp messages from a family who successfully migrated to Newburgh, New York, as we speak, just because we have that kind of sincere relationship. And that's just the way it is, for me. I cannot consider, even if it's just a passing moment with someone, right now I'm in a village in Western Honduras, and I've established genuine relationships with the people here. This is just maybe because of the way I am or whatever, but I don't try to, just because that is my job, it doesn't mean that I have to lock who I am and my personality in a box and for the time we spent together. And that's how it ends up being, that I'm able to share these very intimate and genuine moments of the folks I'm with amongst each other, by themselves, or in facing whatever the world throws at them.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that you brought up a little bit about treating someone like they're human. I think that's like a really basic thing that sometimes we forget as being photographers, is that we might have a camera, but it doesn't mean that we need to have that distance between who they are as a person, and I think that's something that is obviously left out of some of the conversations, even in education around photography. I don't know how Michael feels about it, but I feel like there's a lot of people that I've known who have gone on to photojournalism, and it's about getting the story and not thinking, well, this is a human being in front of you who's experiencing any range of emotions from joy to pain. And to not acknowledge that they are a human being experiencing those things seems like wildly inappropriate and unethical. Yet somehow that's a process that we see repeated over and over and over again. And so it's really, I mean, quite encouraging to see people working in a different kind of way.
No, absolutely. I don't know if there's time to talk about it, but I have let's say like a rule that I kind of live by. No picture is worth more than a person's dignity. And whenever I feel that a story might place someone's life at risk, or the person at that moment is at risk from any kind of threat, even if it's an internal threat of self-destruction or whatever it may be, I engage with them first, whether it's providing relief or helping out or just listening. And the pictures come second. This has led to many cases where if I would to put the photographer glasses on or whatever, I would say, this is a once in a lifetime moment. Don't mess it up. You have to take the picture. But and advice some a well-known journalist gave me: the decisions you make on the field are the decisions you have before you make them. You have to realize that you have to live with that decision for the rest of your life, and only you will know what you did and what you chose and did not choose in that moment. And this happened to me because I don't just focus on Honduras. I was in the Mediterranean during the Syrian and Iraqi and Afghani exodus of the mid-2010s. And there was a moment where I had to choose to either take the picture of a life raft about to sink off the coast of one of the islands in Greece or do something. I decided to do something. It was either that or not, you know, and that's whenever I get a chance to speak with new starting journalists or even people who've been at it for a while, this is something I don't really budge on. It matters more than a life matters more than a picture or whatever.
Yeah, and I think, you know, there's a, you know, there's sort of a reckoning happening. I don't know if, you know, everyone else is sort of in this, but I feel like at conferences, et cetera, the more that you see photographers participating in that sort of, the picture comes first, the image comes first. And sort of these questions, there's a lot of, I think, defensiveness that happens. And so I think sort of creating a new crop of photographers who don't have that ingrained sense of importance over someone else's story or experience is so really pivotal to like making that shift, hopefully in the future. At least that's my feeling on it as we sort of move forward. And I think your story illustrates that as well. I think that, you know, reading back on like Kappa or these sort of classic photojournalists, they often talk about the idea that like they didn't intervene. And I always was, even through school, I was like, why didn't you intervene? Like that picture wasn't actually worth that person's life or that person's well-being or safety, you know. And so
right, there was this kind of purity
right
of the photograph and the photographer being this sort of neutral observer in some ways, which of course, if you've ever been out photographing conflict and been involved in these things, you know that there is this kind of and Tomas, maybe you've experienced this if you travel with other photographers, other photojournalists, there is this competitiveness as well. And it's rewarded often by the editors, this sort of competitive, you know, I have the shot that everybody wants, I have the most violence or the most impactful moment. And I think it leads to a bit of corruption in the world of photojournalism, this sort of reward based kind of system of you know, whose photos get selected and how they get selected. But yeah, you know, I think this idea though of expanding on how how we can describe, how we can photograph, how we can document is really interesting. And in Camilla's work, in your work, I'm really fascinated by the duality in the portraiture. And when I look at it, I think about the duality of the way people self-identify when they migrate or when they're in a new culture. And I find that really fascinating that it's this split, but yet in your images, it's still this one, right? There's still this whole person.
Right.
Well, and
yeah, I also wanted to remark about just, you know, relaying on what Tomas said is I've always thought of, you know, photographing the subject or, you know, whatever is going on as a collaboration. It's a collaboration between you and whatever you're photographing, if it's a person. So if that person is in danger or that person is in peril, then there's not going to be a photograph. You have to honor that person first. You have to give respect to that person. So then you're able to collaborate and make the photograph happen. You know, it starts with the subject first, you know, and it's this give and take that you have between that person, you know, like they're giving a part of themselves to you. So you have to honor that. But your question was about
identity. I mean, I should give some background. Jennifer was here for this, but in the previous session, it was really remarkable. One of the artists was talking about how they saw themselves not as, you know, part, you know, Palestinian and part Spanish. And, you know, we talked a little bit about how that idea of breaking your identity in half is sort of an odd thing, that you were, you know, fully Palestinian, you're fully Spanish, you're, you know, your identity is full. There's not like a portion of it, it's all together. And so I think Michael was asking a little bit about that idea of, you can take
right, of identifying in a kind of duality or more for that matter, and then but trying to reconcile all of that and being that whole person, right? I feel like that's in your portraiture.
Well, and that use of diptychs, I will say, like, yeah, definitely. Like, even if it exists, like, I feel like you're almost capturing two sides of this person, but together that is who they are.
Gemini.
Yeah, definitely. And so, I mean, I guess a follow-up question to what Michael, I think, is asking would be, you know, how do you resolve those multiple identities in your work? You know, Tomas talked a little bit about living in New York. I mean, that's definitely part of your identity now, right? But also identifying as someone from Honduras, like, how do you sort of grapple with having all those identities in one?
I think embracing it. You know, you're not just one thing, you know, we're multifaceted, and loving yourself for that. Like, we can't change our past. We can't change what has happened in our life. But, you know, looking back and making, you know, the mistakes and making, you know, the problems and everything that has happened, making that into something positive. And I think that's the goal.
May I also say something?
Yeah,
like,
we're multifaceted.
As like, at least I'm gonna say personally, like, I looked at my otherness as something that was a disadvantage, that it was something that I lacked something because I wasn't from here. And I think now our works here, the conversations earlier, and just what's happening in photography and decolonization, identity, like, we are bringing something, this distance that happened, like the subject and the camera, it exists less, I believe, when someone that comes from the same place is doing the act of photographing. And so even when I had to talk about things like the memories, the sweet memories of my childhood, how beautiful the place was, and me and my sister, and all these iconic places in my town, and the symbol of the mountain, but nobody wanted to talk about the environmental crimes that we all witnessed, that our economy of the whole state is based on mining. All the finances from the government, education, the universities, everything is connected to mining. There's no way to separate one thing from the other. And this dependency made us all participants of the crimes. And talking about that is difficult. Nobody wants to hear. I know of photographers that started talking about the cultural institutions financed by mining industries that wouldn't get shows or wouldn't be part of exhibitions, or so it's a hard. There are topics that only if you're really part of it you can talk about, and Tomas can do something for Honduras that not many people can do. Camilla can talk about the immigrant experience like few can do, and we need to embrace those, that ability and make it part of it. That's embrace it completely. So,
if I can add to that, to what Jennifer just said, that despite that everything, not to hyper focus on how miserable everything is, because everything is miserable. That is the truth. But some of these big legacy institutions are creating spaces, are being forced to create spaces. I like to think that they're going to be sustainable efforts to include people such as myself. World Press Photo made me one of their judges this year, which that would have been unheard of at any other moment in history. And I there's out of curiosity, I looked who the prior judges had been, and it's all generally just been Europeans, Americans, few Asians, few Africans here and there, but truthfully just American, European. And the fact that they allow someone from Honduras who hasn't been in the industry, which I hate to say, for so long, all that long, is, I like to think that it's not just virtue signaling, and it will be the beginning of a long-term commitment to representation that is actually valuable, not just performative, which is so often the case. And as far as identity are concerned, I'm like what you said, Ryann, sorry, is that I can't help it. I migrated to the US for 17. I got deported when I was 29. So very formative years led to who I am. It would be ridiculous for me to renounce that. It is who I am. It comes across in my body language. Like I start talking New York American English when I speak English. And then when I speak Spanish, it comes out Honduran. It's just the way it is. But if I look into my past, I was born in Guatemala. My mother's Palestinian, and my father was, his father was a exile from the Basque country. So that's, what am I, and ultimately, I suppose no one knows that other than you. And for me, this is a major theme, and I'm glad you brought it up in the work that I'm showing at the gallery, is to show the process of realizing your identity in the process of migration. As I've seen traveling with people, how migration, the action of, is a layer that is added to their identity and ultimately becomes a part of who they are. It's such a transformative process. And if you look at the work and read some of the stories of mine that are online or on my Instagram, this is something that I touch upon often. And just for the future, I'm working on a project right now, on a 18-month long project on Palestinians of Latin America, which will look to ask all these questions, you know. And I'm going to Brazil, so I'm looking forward to that.
And I should note too, for anyone's interested, Maysun had a really wonderful artist talk this afternoon about Palestinian work and what that is like, kind of addressing issues with conflict and how little we talk about it. So it's definitely worth checking out if you want to sort of dive into somebody who's working in that space as well right now too. So I always end, and Camilla knows this, I always end all my talks with sort of talking about mental health, because I think it's really important as we sort of move through our culture, and also to make our students aware. It's important to weigh out not only the work that you do ethically and morally, but also understand that you have to take care of yourself. So I always ask artists, you know, all of you are dealing with issues in a variety of different ways, whether it's health or social, that is in many ways traumatic, right? And you're hearing stories sometimes that are even more traumatic than when even you bring to the table. So I guess my question is to artists who are in that space, that how are you taking care of yourself? How does mental health play a part in your process? Right? Or does it? It might not, but you know, how do we sort of process the things that you see or hear, your own experiences? You're trying to give students more tools as they sort of get more into photography in this space.
I think talking about it, just being vocal about how you're feeling, you know, putting it out there, I think is important. Don't keep it inside, you know, because then it'll fester. But
yeah, I agree. And knowing who to talk about it, like in my case, speaking to someone who doesn't really get it or doesn't have experience on what you're doing isn't the same, even as understanding as they can be, or empathetic as they want to be. In my experience has been to speak with people who have at least some kind of experience on, say, traveling extensively or having been in a shootout, which has been my case. And it's good that you bring it up because this is I have been diagnosed with PTSD. It's something that I thought that I was I don't know, I was not gonna get it or endure it, but after like compartmentalizing and disassociating myself from awful experiences that were far too many to really talk about right now, it all just stacked up until I had kind of a break, like a mental break, and it forced me to seek counseling that I thought, why do I need that? And I did, and the tools that afforded me, other than talking about it, was not have an outlet to process it. So for me, that became publicly writing about these experiences on Instagram. Just that's what worked for me, and also something that is diametrically as far away as possible from the subject matter. So that became cooking, because in New York I was a cook to make ends meet. So yeah, that's what I would recommend. But what I want to stress is, especially if you end up working with the subject matter that is of the kind that we're talking about, it does add up. And sooner or later, if you don't address it, it will take its toll.
And I mean, I know that photographers in general, especially photojournalists, tend to really sort of avoid that conversation. And I think, again, that idea of building a new generation of photographers and artists who understand that trauma is impactful. And like you said, it stacks until it can't anymore. So I think it's really important to find outlets. A lot of my work is about trauma and memory and loss. And I always tell people that it sounds silly, but I watch terrible TV as my outlet. Like that is, I watch the worst shows in the world because they're silly and it's unnecessary. And it's just one way to sort of relieve some of the tension of the kind of work I do. And so I think it's really important for students and for people who are looking at that. It doesn't come out of, we think about resilience as like not talking about it, but resilience is like knowing how to cope with it and getting help or speaking about it as you need to. And I think it's an important tool to make sure we have. Yeah. So are there any questions in the
No,
chat?
I mean, just along those lines, Jennifer, your work is maybe the most directly a response to trauma within the work. And I don't like to think of photography as therapy because I think there are real therapists out there and we're not good at our own self-therapy, but I imagine that is also, that expression is, you might think necessary for yourself, right?
I never expected the healing that it came from sharing my story. I never envisioned this, how impactful it would be for my life. To share these experiences. So yeah, speak out, whatever you're feeling, whatever you experience, it will come back to you tenfold. It takes a lot of courage. Some of my family members still don't know the whole story. And so it's easier to talk to strangers sometimes. And so yeah, just speak out.
I was gonna say, one of the comments we got earlier today is someone was walking through the show and had to stop because it was so heavy. Like they couldn't go on and finish the show and look at all the texts and everything. They had to kind of take a break from it. And I think that's such a good reflection of that's someone just walking through that space. That's not even that experience. And so I think it tells you that, again, that sharing the story does two things. It illuminates an issue or a topic or a story and experience, but it also really impacts the viewer to hopefully make them think about it. And, hopefully we're also taking care of ourselves in the process of that as well. And so I think that's about an hour, right?
Yes.
We're in a good place. I just want to thank everybody for two really important things. Number one, for trusting us to show the work. That is just an incredible honor for both of us. We're just so happy to have the work in the show and have such a variety of experiences being shown. And also to thank you to take out time, all of your really busy schedules to talk to our students and our community. It's really lovely that you're able to give us the time that you did and to be as open and honest and vulnerable in some ways with that material and with that experience. And so just thank you so much from Michael and I.
Yeah, and thank you for sticking with us for all the things the delays we had with putting the show together. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
And right on cue, our lights went out here, but okay, good.
So just for everyone's notice, the talk will actually be available online in a little while. Michael will tell you when.
So yeah, jkcgallery.online. I'll have both talks posted within the show, as well as the links for those of you who are selling work, and of course some of you are giving to charities. Some of you actually could use money, and that's great. And that will all be there. Yes.
Yeah. So just a thank you to the audience, everyone showing up. We had a really wonderful turnout for this whole day. And so it was really for a Wednesday, which I think is pretty spectacular. Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you again. And everyone in the audience, if you hadn't had a chance to come in, definitely come in and see the work. It's
Tuesdays and Fridays, 10 to 2.
Yeah. And so it's a really incredible show. And for those of you who are too far away, the catalog will be available next week as a flip book, and then artists will be getting their own printed copy as well.
Yes.
So yeah. So
thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
want to thank Jennifer and Tomas for sharing your story and your insights. I really loved meeting you virtually and hope to meet you in person.
Absolutely.
And thank you to Ryan and Michael
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right.
All right.
for giving
Have a
us the
good night.
platform.
Yeah. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Bye.